There's been a major flare-up in Eastern Ladakh on the south bank of the Pangong Lake. Now, it's important that we explain where exactly this is taking place. I will do that. But before I do that, I'm actually going to go through a couple of statements which the government has now released. They've said that the Chinese soldiers carried out provocative military movements to change the status quo near the Pangong Tso Lake on Saturday. Let's show that map over here. But they were blocked by Indian soldiers, is what the government said. This took place on the south bank of the Pangong Tso. It is significant because this is a new area. Now, the incidents took place over the 29th and 30th of August. This is a Defence Ministry statement. It's been put up by the PIB, the Press Information Bureau of India. What they have said in this government release, and it's important that it's an official release because over the last several months, if not the last year or so, information comes by the way of sources. It does not come by the way of on the record statements. These pictures are actually old pictures, and we need to sort of label them as archive images. So the statement says, the Chinese People's Liberation Army troops violated the previous consensus arrived at during military and diplomatic engagements during the ongoing standoff in Eastern Ladakh and carried out provocative military movements to change the status quo. Indian troops preempted this PLA activity on the southern bank of the Pangong Tso Lake and undertook measures to strengthen our positions and thwart Chinese intentions to unilaterally change facts on the ground. Okay, so now let me just explain what exactly it is that we are talking about. Let's have this map up full screen so that I can talk about the areas where this has taken place. Let's have the map up full screen, right. Now, what you see over here is the Pangong Lake. That's the large body in white, in blue, I should say. To the north, you can see it's marked North Bank and it says Fingers. So in that Fingers area is where the earlier skirmishes took place. That's the area where the Chinese intruded in the past from the month of May onwards, and that's what we've been talking about for the last several months, in fact. What has now taken place is on the south bank, and this is important to understand. It's on the south bank of the Pangong Lake in an area we are told is in that Thakung area which you see to your left, where this we don't know the nature of the clashes. Some reports indicating that they were physical clashes, others indicating that the Indian Army proactively moved into an area to prevent the Chinese from unilaterally moving into areas and changing the status quo on the ground. So, very important. Now, let's go to the next map, and this is what we need to try and explain. We claim that the line of actual control exists to the right. China claims that the line of actual control exists to the left. Let's change to show the China claim. Do we have that on the map? Right. So, therefore, the Chinese were moving left, or they were, I mean, it's difficult to, in terms of the perspective of this map, the Chinese have a claim which lies to the west, India has a claim which lies to the east, and therefore the area in between, change, is actually the disputed area which exists, and this disputed area exists on the north bank of the Pangong Lake, which we've been speaking about thus far, and the south bank of the Pangong Lake as well. But let's come back to that first image so that I can explain a few more details. The south bank of the Pangong Lake is very heavily militarized. There is a massive Indian military presence. It's always been there, and therefore an attempt by the Chinese to unilaterally change the status quo on the ground by pushing westwards towards that Thakung area is something which is a matter of grave concern. Why? Because this is in fact a new area where the Chinese are trying to change the status quo. We are in the middle of talks to try and disengage, get the Chinese to disengage, arrive at a mutually acceptable solution. Not only have the Chinese not done that, they are pushing into areas and trying to alter the status quo. This is completely unacceptable to the Indian Army, which is why the Army in a statement, the government now in a statement says, on the night of the 29th and 30th, PLA troops violated the previous consensus arrived at during military and diplomatic engagements during the ongoing standoff in Eastern Ladakh. They carried out provocative military movements to change the status quo. Let's go back to the map, please. That's a much clearer image. Indian troops preempted this PLA activity on the southern bank of the Pangong Tso lake and undertook measures to strengthen our positions and thwart Chinese intentions to unilaterally change facts on the ground. Now, what exactly is it that we were trying to do? Were there physical skirmishes that took place? Again, the army hasn't gone on record on that. We haven't been able to source this, but some indicators, and it's been reported elsewhere, that some physical clashes may have taken place, but it's clear that the Indian Army acted proactively and established positions on the ground to prevent the Chinese from making any incursion. It's likely taken place, full screen, in that Thakung area. So that's where it's now taking place. Remember last week, after strong statements by Foreign Minister Jaishankar that the standoff along the line of actual control this year was the most serious since 1962, China said differences along the border needed to be sorted out peacefully. If this is indeed the case, why is China opening up a new front in the standoff between India and China, which has taken place previously in 5 areas, and it's safe to say that this is the 6th area where this has now taken place. Dr. Bharat Karnad, who watches China very, very closely, joins us now. Dr. Karnad, is it not a matter of huge concern that, you know, this is a new area? It's the south bank of Pangong, but militarily it's a different area. What does this indicate?
Well, yes, but what is of greater concern, I think, is that the Indian Army didn't think it prudent to preempt any such move, because after all, they claimed the northern bank of Pangong Tso, and their claim lines extend to the south, while ours overlap, in a sense, onto the shores of the Pangong, southern shores of the Pangong Lake. So we should have secured that bank very early on to preempt such Chinese movements. We haven't done that, and we seem to wait for the Chinese to do something before we react. Here you are, you know, they have made the intentions very clear that they mean to now extend their control to the south bank and to the extent of their claim lines in the south. So what is India going to do now? You cannot say we have merely defeated this particular operation by the Chinese to establish themselves in the Thakung La area. I think we need now to be proactive in some sense and aggressive and claim the lines right up to the south bank of the Pangong Tso, right where they have made the jump onto the southern side, because that also gives you some little leverage in terms of both defense, because you'll have the Pangong Tso between you and them, and insofar as you have a bargaining card. Right now you have no bargaining card. They have pushed you to Finger 4 on the northern bank, and now they are in Thakung La on the southern bank. Mm-hmm. So I think we really have to become a bit more aggressive rather than merely being reactive, passive and defensive. You have to go on the offensive sometime. What is the provocation that's going to make you do it?
Right.
Is this not a provocation enough?
Right.
Even if you regarded the earlier provocations of their intrusions into Galwan, into the Y junction on the Depsang plains, and now and on the Pangong Tso, where they kicked you out from your claim line on Finger 8 to Finger 4. Now, this is something that should be deemed unacceptable by the government and the Indian Army.
Okay. Lieutenant General Rameshwar Roy joins us now. General, correct me if I'm wrong, but the southern bank of the Pangong is very heavily militarized by the Indian Army. It's always been the case, as opposed to the northern bank or the area between 4 and 8. What does this indicate? That they are willing to actually push militarily in areas where we have always had a much stronger physical military presence on the ground?
You see, Chinese PLA, they have seen that whatever positions they have advanced up to, they have got it very easily with not having a single shot being fired by the Indian Army. Now they're getting encouraged by this kind of a response. So they are now exploring how far can they come without being opposed. So I think this is a very good sign that the Indian Army has shown the resolve to stop them at this point and no more. And because going by this, I would only presume that this kind of a resolve continues. The problem
we've lost
is
go ahead.
The way we are being told that we have this direct deployment of 30 to 40,000 troops on either side. This has a very great possibility of any kind of a small action resulting into a big flare-up. So, that kind of an escalation will always remain a dangerous issue. And if Chinese are trying to push their way in now, I only hope that they have tried to build this in, and they should be prepared for a stronger and bigger response from the Indian Army.
General, I just want to understand from you, the area on the South Bank, we've reported the Fingers area very carefully, that's in the North Bank. In the South Bank, between where we claim the line of actual control, which lies further to the east, and the area near Thakung and Chushul, which is to the west, that's a disputed area. But have we always patrolled that area? Do the Chinese typically come in and go back? Could you tell us about what has happened in the past on the South Bank?
See, the patrolling issue has always been that earlier our patrolling in the Northern Bank used to go up to Finger 8 and Sarja. The point is exactly down south we used to go that much, but they presume now, Chinese are presuming that since they are now sitting controlling the heights up to Finger 4, they are entitled to come right down south across the lake so that they are able to claim that much portion of the lake as their part of the lake. And because of that, I think they are trying to push in more on the southern bank also towards the west, and this is what is being contested by the Indian Army. I think for a change, or it's a good sign that we are now showing resolve, that whatever you have taken until now is not okay. I mean, we are still talking about it for status quo ante, but you cannot push us anymore.
General Roy, just if you can reflect on the point mentioned by Professor Karnad, that in as much as we are showing resolve now, it's not a, it's still reacting to what the Chinese have done. What stopped us from physically occupying our claim areas off the South Bank when the Chinese pushed westwards on the North Bank? Why didn't we do that? Why didn't we react then?
Vishnu, one is the defensibility of these tactical features, and second is, we have always been very careful not to provoke the Chinese in any manner, because we thought that if peace and tranquility is the bottom line, we must maintain along the LAC. We have respected it more than the Chinese respecting it ever. And for that reason alone, even on the Northern Bank, when we saw their initial movements or anywhere else also, we did not react to them quickly, maybe because we didn't want to provoke them, because any occupation from our side proactively would invite a reaction from their side as well. And we were restraining ourselves from that kind of a flare-up. But now that it seems inevitable, I think we are prepared to face them head-on now. That could be the only explanation that I can think of.
Bharat Karnad, let's face it, the talks have failed. There are important talks happening at Chushul. We'll try and address the immediate situation at Thakung. But going forward, where does this leave the Indian Army? Because, if you have, or India, if you have statements by military leaders who say that, look, India reserves the right for military action, that is stating the obvious. When you do take military action, you don't announce it and then choose to do it. It doesn't work that way. So beyond the rhetoric, is there anything realistically that you think India might do?
Well, look, the Indian build-up, military build-up in Ladakh, in Eastern Ladakh, and particularly on the southern part of the Pangong Tso area, is pretty hefty. The point is, I think we'll be able to sustain a move right to the junction where Chinese have jumped the lake onto this side, the southern bank. We have to move to that and cut them off there. You cannot then stick to your, the claim line that falls slightly short of that junction where they have, crossed onto the southern side. We have to get them out there forcefully. And I've said this from day one, all day in my post. We believe too much in, negotiation and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, the army too, in a sense, has assumed an NEA kind of mindset where they actually believe that talking in Chushul or someplace with some wretched Chinese local commander is going to be the answer. It doesn't work that way. The Chinese look at what's happening on the Taiwan front, on the Fujian coast. The Chinese believe that it is their right to claim the territory that they claim as their own, to do whatever they have to do to realize their claims. And this is what they have said vis-a-vis the Eastern Ladakh claim lines. And this is said last week by both President Xi and the Foreign Minister Wang Yi after what is called the Work in Tibet Symposium in Beijing. That's the supreme body deliberating on Tibet affairs.
Okay.
So if they've made it very clear what the aim is and objective is, and has always been, why are we hesitant then in shall we say, beefing up our military options, not just in terms of strengthening your presence, but actually doing something to block their advance onto the southern side of the Pangong Tso, because they have offered you enough provocation. We should do the same in vacating their blocking move on the Depsang at the Y junction, because that, in a sense, prevents us, from reaching our making our access.
Professor, one sec. I just want to go back to General.
Sure. Dolabeg Oldie Road.
Sure. General Roy,
these are the kinds of things that we should have thought about and reacted.
So let me just rotate the strike for half a second. I take all your points completely. General Roy, I'm just trying to understand how does China militarily assert its presence on the southern bank? Do they boat across their soldiers, or do they approach from the east? How exactly do they show up their presence?
The only way to assert the presence in these areas is when you physically occupy certain heights and those locations. And Chinese are now the same manner as they done with the northern flank up to Finger 4. By now, the Indian Army has shown the resolve. It has gone in for mirror deployment, and it has told them in no uncertain terms that this and no more would be permitted, regardless of the escalation, whichever way it goes. And I think that's a very good sign, because Chinese also, at this point of time, they do not want any bigger flare-up, because so far what they have got is without firing a single bullet. And now they have been conveyed that no more will be allowed to you. Whatever you have done until now, that is still being negotiated. But as far as your any further ingress is concerned, that will be met with a stronger force.
Right.
And for that reason alone, the needs to be complemented right now.
Okay, General, I'm just going to get in over here.
That look here, Vishnu, what happens is that when such a force comes in advance, and
General, I'm just going to interrupt now because I need to take a short break at this stage. We will continue this conversation throughout the day, this China situation now. This is the 6th area where they've actually made an attempt at an incursion. They've been successful elsewhere, not quite successful this time. We've acted proactively. But the larger point is India going to react in a sterner manner? That remains to be seen.